Think we're gonna go ahead and get started. Hello, thank you guys all for joining us today. It's really good to see you. And my name is Sam Myers-Miller, and I'm here with my colleague, Julia Clark. And we're both from THDA. I am a research analyst. I started in January, so I'm pretty new, but really excited about this work. We are traveling from Nashville, but we both have ties to Knoxville in some ways. I did my master's at University of Kentucky. Go Vols. So
I have one graduated and one still student at UT Knoxville. Go
we'd like to start by just thanking Shane, Rick, and Vincent for helping us organize this meeting today in this really awesome space.
Jeffrey.
Yes, sorry. And yeah, thank you for all the time and care that it took to put into this meeting today. And just a side note, these slides will be posted for anyone's future reference. So yeah, how many of you are familiar with the consolidated plan, just to get a gauge? Okay, a couple. So I'm just going to give a brief overview. So the consolidated plan serves as the state's application for $50 to $60 million in annual federal funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, so HUD. This meeting is broader than focusing on just these 5 programs, but they inform what we will be discussing. So the funds are distributed from the state to local communities through these 5 programs. So we have the Community Development Block Grant, the Energy Solutions Grant, Home, Housing Trust Fund, and Housing Opportunities for Persons with HIV and AIDS. So the consolidated plan is also an opportunity for us in the state to assess Tennesseans' housing needs and coordinate with local stakeholders to address the issues that y'all are seeing in your communities. So we're really excited to hear from you today. And just a side note, again, we have numbers in the bottom right-hand corner. If there are charts or maps or just any information that you do want us to go back to, if you have a question, you can just jot down the number. So we have a broad spectrum of coverage with these programs. HUD distributes the money to the state of Tennessee, and then they're further distributed into these to 3 sources that overlook these 5 programs. So we have the first program, the CDBG, and that is they oversee the economic and community development. Sorry, let me start over. CDBG is overseen by the Economic and Community Development Program, and it is mainly focused on infrastructure for areas with low income, so households with 80% AMI or less. Similarly, Home is also for low income households. It's more focused on reno and renovation. And these 3 programs are overseen by THDA. So HTF, also overseen by THDA, is projects must benefit extremely low income households. So even lower percentage of AMI, so 30% AMI or less. And then the third program that THDA oversees is ESG. And this is for people experiencing homelessness or seeking homelessness resources and services. And then the 5th program is HOPWA, and this is overseen by the Department of Health. This is mainly for people living with HIV and AIDS, and they also have to be low income. So again, there's a broad spectrum. Okay, We're good. So, as I did say I lived in Knoxville, but I'm not originally from Tennessee, and Amara, who made this presentation, is not originally from Tennessee. Willie is not from Tennessee originally. So we do want to start by saying that we approach this conversation and this presentation with a spirit of humility, and we're really here. We want to learn from you. So the data included in this presentation will not completely and may not accurately capture the needs of your communities. Additionally, the data is out of date, so we're mainly using ACS data here and from 2 years ago in 2022. And we know that ACS is also subject to sampling error. So keep that in mind as we're going through this data. So as a result of those kind of the messiness of some of this data, we do want to hear from you what you did notice in the data, what seemed accurate and captured the things you see in your communities, and also what seems off and what may be missing. We're very open to saying, like, you looking at the data and saying that's not what we see at all. And again, the data, these are numbers, so they don't capture the strengths of communities. It's we don't see how close-knit communities are. We don't see the generational connections to the community and the land and place and the culture that exists in the East Development District. So keep that in mind. But again, we'd love to hear your feedback and see whether this reflects what you are seeing. So today's agenda, we're going to start with the housing needs presentation, and then we'll move into question and answer time as well as comments. So that can be when you present the things that you see align and don't, perhaps with the data. And then we're going to move into focus groups. So we have 2 focus groups planned for you today. We have one on housing affordability and then one on homelessness. So I just want to gauge really quickly interest in either or both of those topics. So who's interested in housing affordability mainly? Okay, and then what about homelessness? Okay. Okay, so a little more in housing affordability, but I think we may split up by topic so we can really dive into those at the end. So when my team thinks about the housing needs environment, we think about all of these things. So we think about the current population and households and household income. This influences how we understand our current housing supply and housing prices. Is there a supply issue? Is there a surplus or a shortage, possibly based on what we know about our current population? Then we're interested in future population and households and how growth may impact communities. And then we move into future housing supply to match that growth. And all of this relates to housing instability. So our framework today, we're first going to be asking what is the region like now? So who lives here? What comprises the current housing supply? How much does housing cost? Then we'll move into what housing is needed. So how do we know we need it? What are the challenges to build that housing? And then what strategies may enable us to build it? So we're going to hold the strategies in our framework for the focus groups, but we just want you to keep in mind, like, we want to know what ideas you have to possibly improve these situations or ideas that you are already implementing in your community. And then finally, we'll get to what happens if the housing isn't built, what housing instability are households experiencing and who is experiencing it. And then again, what strategies may address current instability and prevent future instability. So we'll hold off on that as well for the homelessness focus at the end. So getting into the current population, households, and household income. So this is a map of the 9 development districts that Tennessee has, and it's a population map. So lighter colors represent lower population and darker color represents high population. And then we also have these gray areas throughout the state that represent urban density. So we see that East is the second most populous area with Mid-South close behind, and then obviously GNRC really sticks out in this as the most populous at about almost 2 times the amount of population in the East, and then East is almost 2 times the population of Southeast. We have Knoxville as one of those dense centers, but we have a lot of other cities as well scattered throughout, like Morristown. And then we also have a lot of rural area in the East. So we know that there are rural and more dense areas. It's a pretty diverse landscape. So this map is showing change now in population, and these triangles represent change. So arrows up and bigger represent bigger increase, and down represents a decrease. And then a circle is no change at all. So we see that East has experienced some rapid growth as a region. It's quick even compared to the regions surrounding it, and about half as fast as the population growth in GNRC. But GNRC is quick even compared to the country, to the rest of the country. So this map now gets to a more granular level on county level. Counties experience different rates of change and also different populations, obviously. So Knox County kind of sticks out in this map at 481,406 population. And so the counties with the dense gray areas do tend to have higher population. So we see a lot of the counties surrounding Knox have some of the highest. And then on the outskirts, like Scott and Morgan are some of the lowest. And then we also see that Knox County is leading in growth. Really, Loudoun is leading in growth, and then Knox is close behind. So Loudoun is at 8.8% increase in population, and Knox is at 6.4% increase in population. And Scott also sticks out as it's seeing very marginal decrease in population. One thing to note for the rest of the maps and slides, smaller counties are subject to error, especially with change, because their population is so small already and the sampling error involved in the ACS data. So keep that in mind, and we'd love to hear from you if you do see some discrepancies in those more rural areas. So who lives here? These are the demographics of East. We see that about 40% of the population are mid-age adults. And then about 40% are younger than 34 years, with 18.9% as seniors. Then moving into race and ethnicity, we see that 86.3% of the population is white. 4.3% of the population is Black. 4.8% of the population is Hispanic, and that includes all racial groups. And then we have all other races sitting at 4.6%. And all other races have gotten compiled into one group due to lack of our representation. This livers would just be too small, but that's just important. And then moving into household income distribution, we see that about 40% of the population makes less than $50,000 a year. And then about 50% of the population is at 50 to 75,000 and below. This is pretty evenly distributed though, so that's important to know. And then moving on to the last graphic, it's also important to note that these group sizes are quite different. So we have 70.3% of people are owners and 29.7% are renters. And so these group sizes are quite different, and we will be comparing them in the future, but it's important to keep that in mind that they're not direct comparisons due to population difference. So moving into home ownership rate, there is huge variation in home ownership rate across the state. So lighter colors here represent lower percentages and darker colors represent higher percentages. East again sits near the top at 70.3% home ownership rate. We see that South Central and Upper Cumberland have the highest, and Mid-South has the lowest home ownership rate. Then when looking at renter and owner ages, we see that renters tend to be younger. So 40% or less, or sorry, 40%, about 40% of the population is a younger adult for renter households, whereas only about 10% of households are younger adults for owner households. And this makes sense to us. It takes time to build wealth and to apply for a mortgage, and that's reflected in these numbers. Yeah, and just a reminder again, owners are overrepresented in this. So then looking at renter and owner races, we see that renters tend to be more Black and more diverse than owners. 8.5% of renter households are Black people, whereas 2.8%, sorry, did I say owner? I meant renter. 8.5% of renter households are Black, whereas 2.8% of owner households are Black people. So this is quite a big difference. And then we still have majority white for both, and all other races are at 8.8% of renter households, whereas all other races sit at 4.0% of households in owners' homes. Then breaking this renter and owner comparison down in income, we see that renter households again tend to be lower in income compared to owner households. 30% of renters make less than 25,000, whereas a little over 10%, so 13% of owner households make less than 25,000. Then when we look at the very top of the spectrum, we see that only 3% of renter households make more than 150K compared to 16% of owner households. So yeah, again, it's interesting to me that owner households are pretty evenly dispersed. There is some representation of the lower income ranges in the owner households. So I'd like to hear more about that from y'all if you have insight into that. Then looking at area median income for owner and renters. Area median income is the midpoint of a specific area income distribution. So low income falls less than or equal to 80% AMI, where median income sits at 100% AMI. And we see that income that is lower percentage AMI here is more like, you're more likely to be a renter household, whereas income that is higher percentage AMI are more likely to be owner households. So for example, 40% of renter households are at lower than 50% AMI, whereas about 45% of owner households are at or below 80% AMI, which is still, there is quite a few people that are at median, at low income AMI percentages in the owner household range. So moving into current housing supply and housing prices, my team thinks about type of housing on this housing spectrum. So we want to make sure every community has opportunity across the full range of housing. And we want a broad spectrum to match that community and population. So we want to point out that the AMI bands that are displayed here do not mean that only AMI bands, those AMI bands live in these housing types, but lower AMI folks are more likely to need housing services and supportive housing than higher percentage AMI, and vice versa. So this is meant to point out the continuum of housing and that people may move up or down the spectrum at any time in their life. So, for example, you may get a degree and have more access to income and move up that spectrum around the mid-age, whereas like you may have a tornado in your community and that may force people down the spectrum. Yeah. So here we see a majority of our housing is one unit detached single family, with the rest pretty evenly distributed, except mobile homes have a little flare up here at 11.4%. So this is a graph on housing starts in the United States. And we sourced this from the Urban Institute. And this graph is really meant to show you how the financial crisis which is represented by this red dotted line, caused a real drop in building homes. And we're only now starting to catch up to the ongoing population growth that we're seeing. So there is a shortage nationally that we're aware of, and shows that we need more housing to match the needs of our population growth. So this map is showing median age of rental housing, with lighter colors representing younger age of housing and darker colors representing older age of housing. And we know that older housing values may represent counties with big communities that have historic districts as well. So I just want to note that we heard that in a different development district. So, but to me, overall, we see that it's pretty old, right, for rental housing with these three counties, Campbell, Anderson, Roane, and Oregon close behind, being the oldest. And then also Sevier sticks out, which to me as young. Sevier sticks out as young, which to me makes sense from my Knoxville context, with development near that area, near the national park. But I, again, would love to hear from you all about what you think is going on there. Sorry, what was that?
The Gatlinburg fire.
Oh. Okay, yeah, that is great context. Could you jot that down, Julia? Oops. And then, so this map is showing the same thing, but owner housing now. We see that overall it's quite younger, but again, lighter colors represent younger and darker colors represent older. And to me, Anderson sticks out here at 46 years. It is one of the oldest still, with Sevier one of the youngest again. So now moving into median gross rent. Light colors represent lower rent and darker colors represent higher rent. And then the triangles represent change. So we see that rent is the highest out of the district in Knox County at $1,097 median gross rent. And I believe sits at the lowest at $646 median gross rent. But we do see that the counties surrounding Knox have some of the mid-range along with the eastern part of the district. And then additionally, we see that Knox also has some of the highest increase with Anderson as well. And then those same counties kind of surrounding Knox County have the biggest increase in median gross rent in the district, with those northern counties, northwestern counties at the lower increase, but still pretty high increase in median gross rent overall. And so this map is median home sale price increase. And to me, Loudon sticks out at the highest at $374,715 for median home sale price. And again, we see kind of a pattern of Knox and the surrounding counties, at least on the eastern side, being near the highest range. But overall, again, we see a great amount of growth, which makes sense to us. But we'd love to hear from y'all. So revisiting our framework, what we have talked about what is the region like, and now we're going to move into what housing is needed. So how do we know we need it, and what are the challenges to building that housing? So when we think about what is needed, we think about cost burden as being a supply issue. So we use that as a metric. So people are not able to find housing or find affordable housing to them. And that says something about the supply available to them in their income band. So cost burden households spend 30% or more of their incomes on housing. And a lot of renters overall are cost burdened. So this whole map, the lowest end is 36.4%, which is still a great amount of the population that is cost burdened, rental cost burdened. East sits at 40.5% cost burden, very close to what Southeast sees as well. But Mid-South sits at the highest at about 50% plus rental cost burden. Now this is showing percent change in rental cost burden. And this is surprising, and again, we'd like to hear from you, but East shows very little change in cost burden over the last 5 years. Southeast has also experienced close to a 5% decrease in cost burden. But we have a mix across the state of increase and decrease. Then breaking this down at a lower level, we see a more complicated story of rental cost burden. So light colors again represent lower and darker colors represent higher cost burden households. And you see that Knox and Hamblin sit at some of the highest cost burden rental households, with Campbell, Union, and Loudon sitting at some of the lowest. And then there's a range of growth and decreasing in cost burden across this region, which is also interesting. But Granger is really sticking out as increasing by 40%. So then moving into severe rental cost burden, severely cost burden households spend more than 50% of their income on housing. So this map is very similar to the previous one, and that these patterns are exactly the same as rental cost burden at 30% of income, but East sits at 19.3% of rental households are cost burdened. And again, we see that severely rental cost burdened households has decreased in East by 2.4%, but we'd like to hear if this reflects what you're seeing. So we see a big mix across this region again, of severe rental cost burden counties in East. Knox sits at 21.5% at the highest and has increased 6.1% in the last 5 years. But Granger has increased the most at 54.6% of rental cost burden households. So now moving into home ownership, we use the Homeowner Opportunity Index. So the Homeowner Opportunity Index tracks the percentage of homes sold in a calendar year that would be affordable to a household with the area median income. So again, dark colors represent lower percentages, and now light colors represent higher percentages. So we see that GNRC and Southeast are at the lowest percentage of homes affordable to the area median income, with Northwest at 75% homes are affordable to the area median income. So East kind of sits in the middle of that. 46.9% of homes are affordable to the area median income in this development district. So this map shows that it's gotten worse in all counties. I think it's gotten worse across the whole state. But we see that Sevier and Cox and also Loudon have some of the lowest percentages of homes affordable to the area median income. And then Morgan, Anderson, and Union have some of the, I'm sorry, I flipped that. Sevier and Cog and Loudon have some of the fewest homes affordable, whereas Morgan, Anderson, and Union have some of the fewest homes affordable. And just a reference, so 27.4% of Sevier County's homes are affordable to the area median income. So returning again to our framework, we're now moving on to what housing instability our households experiencing and who is experiencing it. So this is a map of the continuums of care serving the East Development District. We see that the green represents the East Development District and that East fits into these three continuums of care. So there's the Knoxville and Knox County continuum, the Tennessee Valley continuum, and the Upper Cumberland continuum. There's a sliver of this. So we're going to walk through stats from each of these, but it's important to note that when we do get to the Upper Cumberland, majority of it is not this district. So it may not be representative of those counties' experiences. So this chart shows the Tennessee Valley continuum of care point in time count stats. So the PIT is always an undercount. The point in time count is one day in the winter, a group of people go out and count the people that are facing homelessness in that moment. Sometimes they distribute a survey depending on what continuum you're in. And other times it's just a visual count, but we know it's always an undercount. And especially for groups like elderly and children where their homelessness may not be as visible to us. They may be in cars, they may be couch surfing. So it's important to keep in mind. And then also for all of these charts, they have different y-axes. So this one goes up to 900. And we see since 2017, it has decreased, but from 2022 to 2023, there was a slight increase in overall. Also, the dotted line is just discerning that that was during COVID, and for some areas, there were loosened requirements in the count, so I think it's a little less reliable, but we'd like to hear from y'all on that. But children have gone down in the last couple of years, while Black people that are facing homelessness are about the same in Tennessee Valley. So this is showing a demographic breakdown by age of the continuum of care. So the chart on the left shows the total population and age distribution of the continuum. And then on the right, we have specifically the point in time age distribution. So we see that mid-age adults are overrepresented. The population of mid-age adults in this continuum sit at 39%, whereas the point in time mid-age adult count is at 52% of this continuum. Additionally, young adults are overrepresented, with seniors and children underrepresented. This is the same thing, but now with the race distribution. So on the left is the total population, race distribution of the continuum of care, and on the right is the point in time. And we see that Black people are overrepresented in the point in time count at 7.8% compared to 1.9% of the continuum's population. Now moving into Knoxville and Knox County's continuum of care, the point in time count reflects that there was a decrease from 2022. Love to hear from y'all about that, but it has increased overall from 2017. But again, we see that mid-age adults and young adults are overrepresented. So mid-age adults are about 62.8% of people counted in the point in time, and 13.4% of young adults were counted. This continuum of care is a little more diverse, but again, we see that 20.4% of Black people counted in the point in time. Whereas we see 8.7% of Black people are represented in the population of this continuum of care. And for the upper Cumberland continuum, we see it has almost doubled since 2022, with children and Black people sitting at about the same. But again, mid-age adults and young adults are overrepresented at about 76% overall of people counted in the point in time count. And in this continuum of care, Black people and are overrepresented as well as at 9.3% of people counted in the point in time. So this map is showing cost burden in areas with concentrated poverty. So this shows census tract level households that are severely cost burdened. So 50% of households. And then for concentrated areas of poverty, which is kind of hard to see, I'm sure, are outlined in red. So we have one here in Sevier, we have a cluster here in Knox, one in Hamblin, and then one in Scott. And an overall pattern we see is that census tracts that are concentrated areas of poverty overlap or tend to overlap with higher percentage of households that are severely cost burdened. And now, so this map is showing it's similar but slightly different in that the census tracts with a concentrated area of poverty and a high level of severe cost burden are 8 to 37% of the heads of households are part of a minority racial group. So we see that really only in Knox County, and again, that overlaps with tracts that are severely cost burdened or tend to be more severely cost burdened. We'd like to hear from you about if you live in these areas or are familiar with these areas, what do you think is going on? And maybe how can we try to combat that? So it's important to note that this presentation is just one component of our needs analysis. Our colleague Amara has already completed a survey statewide that we're going to start analyzing soon and digging into. And then also the focus group following this presentation are a key component where we actually get to hear from y'all. But yeah, does anyone have, what questions or comments do you have? What did you notice in the data? And what seemed to accurately or inaccurately portray your community's experiences? And, we just got a
I
mic.
give a round of applause to Sam for this great presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Huge effort for on both sides.
Thank you, Julia.
And any questions? I have the microphone. What? Anyone have thought?
Okay.
Are we? The data looks a little older. It seems like the median household rate and everything's a lot higher, a little, not a lot.
Currently it is higher. Yeah.
And I think, I think we're seeing homelessness going up. So, people are saying they need 3 times the rate for their salaries.
Okay.
So I think that's causing a lot of
Yeah.
issues here as well. I think the housing shortage, maybe I missed it, but I think, that's causing a big issue. You've got people coming out of state that have cash, that are driving their home prices up. You have companies buying houses that look like they're driving prices up. I like to get some of the other people, you all see the data, a little out of date. Where we are now, I know that I think the rental prices are a little higher than what we were showing there.
Okay.
Just polling some of the people in my office, we've got families living together more now than we've had in the past. I think last time I saw something from the real estate, they said about 15 to 20% live in Knoxville, can go to housing that's available in Knoxville.
Great.
So, it's, especially now in Knoxville, it's just up. Some of the surrounding areas, talk about housing, I'm the executive director for East Tennessee Development District. We cover 16 counties, and some of our meetings talk about housing. And like in Cotton County, Morgan County, they can really get people to build houses. In Knox County, others surrounding, Maryville, Anderson, they're making money there, so they're building houses there. So and that's, I think that's what we're seeing in the mountains here. So I'll be quiet.
No, that's great. Thank you so
That's
much.
kind of some of the things I know.
Here,
So I'm just gonna jump on that because we just met. I'm Patrick from East Tennessee Realtors. So yeah, I would say with rentals, we're seeing the average in Knoxville is $1,400 now. So that's about $400 more,
yeah.
in those 2 years. And obviously people aren't seeing that amount in their salaries increase, necessarily. So that cost burden is just going up and up. And then I would also found it interesting in looking at Loudoun County and talking about the affordability there for homeownership. An interesting fact there is there's moratoriums in place for building. So that could be impacting why you're seeing that lack of affordability there. That is in place currently. So those are just 2 things that I noticed, as far as that goes.
Great, thank you.
And I'll take really try to slow it down. If they 5 acre plots, start, they're gonna run out of lands. So that wasn't a good move on their part.
Yeah.
Mayor will bid, but that's just what's going on.
Well, great. I think that's oh, you have, yeah. Could you pass?
Can you go back to the, here, Eden rental for Knox County?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know whether you said it was slight increase, decrease, or.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. For,
or not?
okay. Let me just. We see. So yeah, there is an increase represented.
And the youth population for the,
For Knox,
yeah,
it's 8.7% is what was.
is it a increase or decrease?
Oh, yes. It's saying slight decrease.
Yeah, that's way off.
Okay, yeah,
I represent the homeless youth population here in Knoxville, so yeah, that's great.
great, thank you.
Very.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, so that's a part of the pit count that we know is a huge flaw, but we still want to show it because it's the only data that we do have access.
And unfortunately, with the young adults, it's hard to catch them. It's a population that's always kind of tough to get. And then with the stipulations and guidelines, they either want to shelter or not shelter. And that's really the hardest thing. We did at 1 year do the youth point time count. And it's even difficult. We even have to get partners go out that day and try to find them. And it's always a lot of stipulations. It could be due to the weather.
Right.
Because a lot of them are not going to be in the areas where older adults are going to be.
Right.
And another issue with a lot of our young adults that are homeless do not trust a lot of people. So it's like, once they get up, they're like a migrant, they move around. So it's really tough to try to get some accurate data.
Yeah.
Let's sit down with me one day and
Yeah.
I'll show you all the young adults.
Okay.
You're here all day, but
I would love
that
that.
information is very off.
Okay.
I think we'll make okay, that's.
I was trying to adjust the odds to see that tiny text.
Yeah, it's,
I think that the most recent that we have is the 2023 PIN numbers.
yes,
And I would be interested to see how this year.
yeah.
And I will strongly support everything that she just said.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think some continuums have published the 2024 and some have not, so we just stuck with the 2023 for comparison reasons, but I agree. I think we will incorporate that into the final. Oh, great, oh.
Sure, thank you. I think that, I may not have a question, I may
Yeah.
have a statement. But in 2006, you were showing the slide of the housing cost, housing starts going way down,
Mm-hmm.
the lowest in 2010. In some ways, that reflects not just something that happened, but it reflects, policies that we have in place. And I think that to look at all the numbers would be valuable, for me, it's really valuable to see public policies that are in place that influence those kinds of numbers. Philosophically, I think that once we stop looking at housing as a commodity versus a public need, we begin to make some huge differences.
Okay, so Cooley's jotting down those notes, but we're gonna jump into the focus groups now and kind of continue these conversations that y'all have started.